Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajananjana Yashodanandana Vrajajananjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Radha Vallabha Radha, Jai Radha Gokula Nanda Radha, Jai Radha Shyam Sundar Radha, Jai Radha Madhava Radha, Jai Radha Gopinath Radha, Gopinath Radha, Jaya Vrindavana Dham, Jaya Vrindavana Dham, Jaya Vrindavana Dham, Jaya Vrindavana Dham, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva, Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Gaura Nityananda, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Gaura Nityananda, Gaura Nityananda, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Gaura Nityananda, Jaya Gaura Nityananda, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Om Jnanatimirhandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Can you hear me okay?
It is better now. It was a bit low, but it is much better. When you come a little closer, it seems.
I will just put my headphones in so that it's
yeah.
So I don't have to lean over. Thank you. Om Jnanatimirhandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadhvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sham Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kante Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sate Devi Paramami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiret Shrivattam Swagata Krishna Punishavana Kirtana Rityantastoya Bhadrani Vidnoti Suritsatam Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nitim Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Neshtiki Satam Prasangan Mama Virya Samvido Bhavantirit Karnar Sayana Katha Tajoshanada Swapavarga Vartmani Shraddharatir Bhaktiranu Shrinavatam Shraddhaya Nityam Ganatascha Shucheshtitam Kalinanati Terikena Bhagavan Vishatehiridi. Persons who regularly hear the Srimad Bhagavatam and take the matter very seriously shall have the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, manifested within their heart within a short amount of time. So today I've been asked to, Prabhuji, if you could kindly let me share my screen. Today we're going to be talking about Maharaj
Sure.
Parikshit.
Okay, done.
Thank you. So we will go to... there you are. Okay, so Maharaj Parikshit. So we'll start from the top. Really praying that whatever I say is it's not going to do justice, but I'm praying that the right words come at the right time. And if at any point anyone has any questions or you want to chip in or comment or anything, please feel free to do so. Okay, so Maharaj Parikshit. So let's start with a little bit about his background. So he was actually Arjuna's son. So we know that Krishna and Arjuna were very good friends. And the whole Bhagavad Gita was spoken to Arjuna. There's a whole beautiful itihas on the Mahabharata of the Pandavas, and the Arjuna was, we could say, the main characters from which we could learn so much from. So Maharaj Parikshit was he wasn't actually Arjuna's son, sorry. So Arjuna had a son. So we're going to talk a bit more about Arjuna a little bit. So Arjuna had 4 wives. He had Draupadi, Ulupi, Chitrangada, and Subhadra. So Subhadra happened to be Krishna's sister. And there's a whole story on how Arjuna marries Subhadra. So she was Krishna's sister. Now, There's a little backstory. So once the Pandavas had been married to Draupadi, or the other way around, she'd been married to them, they were then somehow ended up in a place called Kandabrust, and they made it really beautiful with the help of Krishna, and it was then called Indraprasth. So they were there, and they had this agreement that Draupadi would spend time with each husband, each Pandava, and that when they would do so, they wouldn't disturb them. They would give them their space. And if there happened to be a disturbance there, then they all had this agreement, because they were so noble and virtuous, that that person would then take 1 year's exile. So very briefly, Maharaj Yudhishthira was with Draupadi, and they were spending time together, and somebody came to the palace to say that something. They came to ask for help. And at this point, Arjun was there, and he was like, "Oh, okay, I can't disturb my brother. He's spending time with his wife, so I will protect this person who needs my help." And then he's like, "Oh, my bow and my arrow are left in the room." So he's like, "Oh, what do? I don't want to disturb them." And then he's like, "Well, I've got to do my duty also." So then he decides that I'm going to go and get my bow and my weapons, but I'm also going to bear the consequences, which is I will take 1 year's exile. And that's what happened. So during his year's exile, he travels around, and he goes to various different places. And one of the places is Dwarka. He goes to visit Krishna in Dwarka, and then sees Subhadra there. And then eventually that's how the love story happens. And then she marries him, and then he takes her back to Indraprasth once his exile is over. So they have a son called Abhimanyu. So this is Arjun and Subhadra's son. And then what happens is Abhimanyu is then married to somebody called Uttara. So there's a little backstory to this also. So we all know that the Pandavas were involved in a game of dice with Duryodhana and his uncle, his mama Shakuni. So unfortunately, they were cheated of their kingdom, and in fact themselves almost. So at the end of the game, what happens is the Pandavas are exiled for 12 years, and on the 13th year there's a condition that they have to live in secrecy. It's Guptavas. So Guptavas means, like, Gupta means secrecy, and they're not to be exposed. And if they are, then the condition is that they would then have to take another 12 years of exile. So during that 13th year, they lived in Matsya Desh, a place called Matsya, a state of Matsya, which was ruled by the king Virat, and he had a daughter called Uttara. So then, while they were living in exile, actually Arjuna happened to be a dance teacher, and he was teaching Uttara dance, and he was his disciple. So when Maharaj Virat, the king, found out, that these are the Pandavas who've been living in our house as servants this whole year, I can't believe it, these are the Pandavas. So then he's like, "Oh, I want to give my daughter to you in marriage." And then Arjun says, "Oh, I can't do that, because she's like my disciple, she's like my daughter. But if you want her to stay within our lineage, if you want her to be part of our family, then we can happily marry her to my son Abhimanyu." And then that's when Uttara is married to Abhimanyu. So Uttara and Abhimanyu are married, and just after that, the Battle of Kurukshetra takes place. So Abhimanyu is a great warrior. He follows in the footsteps of his father Arjun, who's like the best warrior in the world at the time, and he was on the battlefield fighting. And the Pandavas had sons also, so there were other sons as well, who they were a bit younger, and they didn't necessarily take that much of a part in fighting, but they were all in the camp. And Uttara was she was Garbhavati at the time, so she was carrying Abhimanyu's son, who was Maharaj Parikshit, in the womb during the battle. Unfortunately, Abhimanyu in the Chakra view is he leaves his body. He's killed. And the Chakravyuh you can see here in this picture, it's like a special war technique, if you like, where view means circle, so there's different circles and layers, and the person is targeted right in the middle. And he was targeted, and nobody could get in, and he couldn't get out. And he was just surrounded by the Kauravas, and they like just surrounded him, won on so many people and defeated him. But he fought like a real brave warrior at the time, and he left his body. So Uttara would, at that time, obviously, women would then follow their husbands. So if their husband left the body, then they would do sati and leave their body also and follow in the footsteps of the husband. But because she was carrying his child, she didn't do that. And actually, she was protected by the Lord in many different ways. And the whole situation for her was very, very, very favorable. She was very lucky. So now the next part of this is when there's a personality called Ashwatthama. So Ashwatthama, he was the son of the guru of the Pandavas, Dronacharya. Now, the whole time that the Pandavas were under the care and the guidance of their guru, Ashwatthama had the opportunity to associate with the Pandavas, but he would associate more with Duryodhana, and his association wasn't very good. Therefore, his thinking wasn't very good, and he was quite envious. Now, he was like, his father, Dronacharya, was very, you could say, had a very soft spot for him, you know, his son. He had a really soft spot for him. And it was almost like he was entitled to privileges, as opposed to really working hard for them and understanding the value of your achievements. So he was given, you know, he had this jewel in the middle of his head. There's a whole story behind that. And his father would also favor him and become weak-hearted. He couldn't sometimes follow through with the right thing to do because of his son, and because of his over affection for his son. So he was a little bit spoiled, and yeah, he didn't have good thinking because of his bad association. And actually, this reminds me of my Guru Maharaj. He talks about the difference between love and attachment, especially when it comes to parents. And he gave the example that if a mother, for example, really loves her son, then she will, or her children, say for example in the morning they're really tired, it's the day off school, you know, so what does she do? Does she let them stay in bed really, really long and think, oh, it's okay, let them sleep, and then just let them get up whatever time? And he said that is actually attachment. But he said if a mother really loves, you know, and a father really loves their children, then they will encourage them in such a way that, okay, we should wake up early in the morning, we should you know, think of Krishna, worship him, do service, do anything that's joyous and worshipful for the Lord and make him happy, you know. So they would encourage them to get up and make everything, all the arrangements really nicely, have a nice breakfast, they'll be good and whatever. So and that is what you call love, when you're engaging your children in the service of the Lord, when you're making them, helping them be Krishna conscious. So that is the difference between love and attachment. And sometimes Dronacharya had too much attachment for his son and wouldn't necessarily be able to right him when he was in the wrong, many times throughout the Mahabharata Itihas. So Ashwatthama, now towards the end of the battle, Duryodhana was sort of like, you know, his thighs had been broken by Bhim. He was pretty much just, you know, in a lot of pain, and everyone had pretty much been killed by the Pandavas by this point, and he was bleeding badly, and he was just lying there lamenting that, you know, the Kuru dynasty is over, and, you know. So Ashwatthama was so just maddened by fury and envy, and he considered Duryodhana his master almost, you know. He did something absolutely horrific. He went into the camp of the Pandavas outside of the hours of warfare. So during war, everybody would fight with each other, but then after wartime, it was after non-fighting time, everything would be almost peaceful. You know, there was this etiquette, this culture that they wouldn't, people just wouldn't fight, enemies wouldn't fight during the time that you're not supposed to fight. So rules were followed very well. Even when an enemy, for example, which I'll talk about in a moment, goes to another enemy's house, they are received so nicely. They're not, almost to the point where enmity is forgotten, you know. So anyway, he broke the rules and he went into the camp, and while the other Pandava's sons were sleeping, he murdered them in their sleep. And then he beheaded them, and then he took the heads of the Pandava's sons to Duryodhana, where Duryodhana was lying. And Duryodhana was actually, he thought that his master would be really pleased, like, oh yeah, he'll be really happy. And actually he was not very happy with Ashwatthama at all. So that wasn't enough for him. Actually, a whole story happens where, you know, obviously Draupadi is absolutely distraught that all the other Pandavas, her sons are all being killed. Abhimanyu has died, and things are so, you know, she's overwhelmed with this grief. And then Arjuna goes after Ashwatthama, and he's like, I'm gonna go after him, I have to capture this person. And Ashwatthama is like, he's so scared, he's like, oh, there's nothing stopping this Arjuna, he's basically gonna kill me. And by this point, his father Dronacharya is also dead. He can't come there to save him, so he's running on his chariot, he's running, and he's like, I don't know what to do, he's gonna kill me. And then he's been given a boon of the Brahmastra. He knows the warfare, the art of this warfare of Brahmastra, this celestial nuclear weapon. And so what happens, he's like, okay, I'm just gonna release it because I've got to protect myself. And doesn't know how to retract the weapon. He only knows how to set it off. And this nuclear weapon is enough to destroy everything. So he lets it go, and Krishna is with Arjuna, and Krishna tells him, okay, he's released this weapon, basically it's going to annihilate everything. So Arjuna, you know also this warfare, this art, so you need to release Brahmastra to counteract, and then stop both weapons. So that's what Arjuna does. And then they capture him, they capture Ashwatthama, and Krishna just says to him, you need to kill him right now, because what he's done is not acceptable. And he gives him so many different reasons why it's not acceptable what he's done. And Arjuna just doesn't have the heart to do it anyway. So he captures him, arrests him, ties him up, and takes him back to Draupadi. And then he's like, right, Draupadi, you tell me what to do with him. And Draupadi is very, very noble and kind, and she's like, I don't want his mom to go through the same thing that I've been through, like I'm going through now. I'm so much pain because I've lost my sons, and his mother will have to do the same. And so she asks him to release him, and she also says, oh, he's a Brahmana's son, he's our guru's son, you've learned everything you know from his father. So they let him go. And then at this point, there is no change in Ashwatthama. After all this mercy that he's been shown, there's no change in him, and he goes off. And he's still enraged with this envy. This fire of envy in his heart is just burning and burning. And you know, envy always leads to destruction. And so he knows that Maharaj Parikshit is in Uttara's womb. He knows that the heir of the lineage to continue for the Pandavas is in her womb, and he just wanted it to end. It was like, the Kauravas have been destroyed, so shall you. So then he sets the Brahmastra off on her and wants to kill Maharaj Parikshit within the womb. So Uttara comes running to Krishna. The battle's ended by this point, and Krishna's about to go to Dwarka. She's about to take leave, and he sees Uttara coming to him. She's running to him, and she says to him the following verse, and she says, oh Lord, Lord of the Lords, oh Lord of the universe, you are the greatest of mystics. Please protect me, please protect me. There is nobody else who can save me from the clutches of death in this world of duality. And so she fully surrenders, and she's asking for protection from Krishna. And at this point, Krishna is looking, and Krishna is the Lord within everybody's heart. Sarvasya chaham hridhi sannivishto matha smritir gnanam apohanam cha vedescha sarve aham eva vedyo Vedanta Krit Veda Videva Chaham. So he's seated within everybody's heart. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 15. And she says, "Oh my Lord, you are all powerful. A fiery iron arrow is coming towards me fast." So this is a Brahmastra. And she says, "It's fine if it burns my body, you know, like if you want, let it burn my body, but please not the child within my womb. Please, please, please help me, oh Lord. Please do me this favor, my Lord." So Krishna knows that what's happened. So it says here, having patiently heard her words, Lord Krishna, who's very affectionate to his devotees, he always protects his devotees. So he at once could understand that Ashwatthama had released this Brahmastra to finish the Pandava's lineage, and therefore she was running after him for help. Okay. So Maharaj Parikshit is then saved by Krishna. The Lord takes a really beautiful form actually, which we'll look into, and he takes a really wonderful form which we'll explore in just a moment, and he saves Maharaj Parikshit. So which verses are we going to read? We're going to read 13 to 14 of the Bhagavatam. Hopefully you can all see the Bhagavatam screen now.
Yeah, we can see.
Wonderful. So 13 to 14. So we're going to go to chapter 18. That was chapter 18, wasn't it? Sorry, chapter 8. That's right. So chapter 8, 13 to 14. So we can see here. So this is really beautiful. So it says, the Almighty Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, having observed that a great danger was befalling his unalloyed devotees, who were fully surrendered souls, he at once took up his Sudarshana disc to protect them. And at this point, the Pandavas were like, "Oh, let's get our weapons out. We're about to, try to counteract this Brahmastra." So Krishna always protects his devotees. And then verse 14, the Lord of supreme mysticism, Shri Krishna, resides within everyone's heart as the Paramatma. As such, just to protect the progeny of the Guru dynasty, he covered the embryo of Uttara by his personal energy. So he actually goes into the womb of Uttara, and then yes. Then so let's look at the description of what he looks like when he's in the womb. So we're going to go to chapter 12 of the chapter 12 of the first canto. So it's 8 to 11. And this is really beautiful how he's described. 8 to 11. There we are. So it says here, the Lord was only thumb high. We're reading this text here. He was only thumb high, but he was all transcendental. He had a very beautiful, blackish, infallible body, and he wore a dress of lightning yellow and a helmet of blazing gold. So he was seen by the child in this form. And then it talks about, how he had 4 hands, earrings of molten gold, his eyes were blood red with fury. This shows that he really cares about his devotees, like who's harming my devotee, and it makes him a little bit angry, it's like, why? So he had red blood eyes, and he loitered about in the room with his club, and he encircled Maharaj Parikshit like a shooting star, so he's like ready to fight and protect his devotee. Yeah, so I think that is all the rest in this, and we'll just read text 11. So while this being observed by the child, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the super soul of everyone and the protector of the righteous, who stretches in all different directions and who is unlimited by time and space, he suddenly just disappears. So how wonderful that, okay, it was a very dangerous situation, very intense, but Maharaj Parikshit, even in the form of an embryo, gets to see the supreme personality of Godhead face to face in a room. So beautiful. So this impression stays with him, and throughout his life, throughout Maharaj Parikshit's life, like when he's a child, when he's growing up, he's always meditating on this form of Krishna. He always remembers this form that he saw in the womb of his mother. So I'm just going to try and move this. Wonderful. So we will move on to the next part. So after the Pandavas left this material world, Maharaj Parikshit then he took birth, he became the ruler of the entire planet. And under his rule, everybody was very happy. There were no like social problems, not too much crime or poverty or disease, and everybody was very, very peaceful. And he had 4 sons as well. And the eldest was Maharaj Janmajaya, which is also comes later on. Okay, and now we're going to read a little bit about Maharaj Parikshit's qualities, like what kind of qualities he had, what kind of person was he, and what the astrologers said about him. So we're going to read chapter 12, verses 16 to 17, and also 19, skim through 19 and 28 as well. Oh, we're on chapter 12 right now, and 16 to 17. So here. And at this point, when Maharaj Parikshit is born, Yudhishthira Maharaj is asking the Brahmanas, he's saying, oh, like, tell us about him. And the Brahmanas said, this spotless son has been restored by the all-powerful and all-pervasive Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. In order to oblige you, he was saved when he was doomed to be destroyed by an irresistible and supernatural weapon. For this reason, this child will be well known in the world as one who is protected by the personality of Godhead. O most fortunate one, there is no doubt that this child will become a first-class devotee and will be qualified with all good qualities. So this is emphasized here. So, okay, he will be so good in so many things, like he's going to be a great warrior and a fighter, and he's going to be follow dharma to the T. He's going to keep everybody very happy, always choose the right path, etc., etc. But the main quality, the best thing about him is that he's going to become a first-class devotee of the Lord. And that's the main thing. So that's 17. And then let's talk a little bit more about, they talk more about him. So he's going to be exactly like King Ikshvaku. He's going to maintain everybody. He's going to follow all Brahminical principles, especially in being true to his promise. And he'll be exactly like Lord Ram, the son of Maharaj Dashrath. He will be munificent, donor of charity, so he's very giving. He'll protect the people who surrender to him. And his name and fame will expand all out through the world. He will be a great bowman here, it says here, just as good as Arjun. And he will be as irresistible as fire, unsurpassable as the ocean. So it's almost like he's undefeatable, He has a strength of the ocean, if you think about it. He's going to be as strong as a lion, as worthy a shelter as the Himalayan mountains. Wow. Forbearing like the earth, so he's going to be very, very tolerant and can take a lot of burden and pressure as well. He's going to be like his grandfather Yudhishthir in equanimity of the mind. Wow, so he's going to be very balanced, munificent like Kailash Hill, the Lord of the Kailash Hill, Lord Shiva. He will be the resort of everybody. So everybody will go to him for shelter. And he will be almost as good as the Lord himself because he will follow in his footsteps. And he will be very magnanimous. And he will be like Maharaj Bali in patience. He's going to be very patient and a very staunch devotee of Lord Krishna. And he's going to perform many sacrifices and follow in the footsteps of his ancestors and experienced men, it says. He will be like the father of kings, who will be like the sages for world peace, and for the sake of religion, he will be the chastiser of the upstarts and the quarrelsome. So this is very interesting, because we all know that Kali Yuga, or Kali, is going to come during the reign of Maharaj Parikshit. And the age of Kali is all about quarrel, right? So Maharaj Parikshit, is interesting how he goes on a journey to he just basically goes all over the world, and he starts to see quarreling and signs of Kali everywhere, and he goes straight away on a mission, and he destroys and annihilates all the things that are going wrong and puts things right. And then it says here, this is really interesting as well, it also talks about how his life will end. He will hear about his death, and it's going to be caused by the bite of a snake bird, and that's going to be because of the son of a Brahmana. And this is so important here. He will get himself free from all material attachment and surrender unto the personality of Godhead, taking shelter of him. Wonderful. And then what it says here, he will inquire about proper self-knowledge from the son of Vyasadeva, Shukadev Goswami, and who will be a great philosopher, and he will renounce all material attachment and achieve a life of fearlessness. It's a wonderful example for us to follow in whatever way we can. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so how Maharaj Parikshit received Kali, let's look into that. Share screen, PowerPoint, lovely. So the Maharaj Parikshit was out and about in his kingdom, and all of a sudden he came across like a person who was like a low-class Shudra, but he was disguised like a king. He was dressed like a king and quite godly, and he was beating a cow on a bull, like just beating, and 3 of the legs of the cow were unfortunately gone, as you can see here in the picture. And she had tears in her eyes, looking really, really scared, trembling. The bull was urinating, he was shaking, and he was really fearful. And he was like, Maharaj Parikshit got very, very frustrated and angry, and he was like, what is this in my kingdom? How on earth can somebody be dressed? He actually addresses Kali in this way. He goes, you're dressed in a godly dress, you're dressed as if you're somebody very, very elevated, and your deeds, what are you doing? Your actions are so low. You're causing harm to somebody who is totally helpless in my kingdom. And he's like, gets ready to take out his sword and annihilate Kali straight away. And Kali straight away surrenders, and he's like, oh no. And there's this beautiful conversation actually as well between the bull, who is Dharma personified, and the cow is Mother Earth, and also seen as our mother. So they're like our mother and father, and there's a beautiful conversation actually between them. And she talks about how she's feeling and what's happened, and he's saying, why are you so upset? You appear as if why are you upset? Is it because the earth is being exploited, or is it that you're calfless, you cannot, or is it that people are now slaughtering you and enjoying your flesh and things like that? He says this. So there's a whole conversation between the bull and mother cow. Well, at this point, Maharaj Parikshit is getting ready to annihilate Kali and kill him, and then Kali straight away takes off his disguise and then surrenders to him. And Maharaj Parikshit gives, his duty is to give shelter to anybody who surrenders to him. So he surrenders and he says, I'm sorry, like I'm yours, please give me shelter. And Maharaj Parikshit had it was very kind, and he shows him lots of kindness, and he says, he hears him out, because he says, I'm here, give me shelter. And Maharaj Parikshit says, okay, but you cannot remain here in my kingdom. You can't remain here because there are things like, you know, gambling and anything against the principles of religion does not happen, especially in my kingdom or anywhere in the world under my reign. So you cannot remain here. And then Kali said, okay, I'll go anywhere you tell me. You just, you know, give me shelter and I'll go anywhere that under your government. So then Maharaj Parikshit says to him, okay, you can go in these 4 places where there is gambling, where there is prostitution, where there is slaughtering of animals, and where there is drinking and intoxication taking place. And Kali was quite cunning, obviously, and he knew that all those things don't take place anywhere in the world because Maharaj Parikshit is under his reign. So he's like, oh, you're saying I can go there, but I can't go anywhere because there's nowhere where these things exist at the minute. And then he says, oh, please give me one more place. And then Maharaj Parikshit says, okay, you can go where there is gold. Because anywhere there is gold, and this is in the verse that I was reading on how Maharaj Parikshit receives Kali, there is a verse that talks about how gold is a place for falsity, it's a place for intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. And so he says you can go there. And obviously gold was everywhere at the time, especially in his kingdom. You know, think about gold like jewelry. In those days, everything was ornated with gold. For example, buildings and decorations, things like that, weaponry. So that's where Kalima went. And then if you think about you know, Srila Prabhupada and the 4 regulative principles that he has established within ISKCON and within this Krishna conscious movement, now you can make the link, you know, why we have to abstain from those certain things, because that's where Kali really resides. And if anybody who wants to progress in their life in Krishna consciousness, has to abstain from those things, from meat eating, illicit connection with the opposite gender, intoxication, and gambling. Okay, so that was how Maharaj Parikshit received Kali. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how Maharaj Parikshit was cursed. So he was out hunting one time, and then he came across a hermitage in the forest, and he was really thirsty and he was really tired, like overly thirsty. So he entered the hermitage and he saw a sage meditating. This was Shamika Rishi. And at that time, Shamika Rishi was completely entranced, you know, completely entranced. It says here in chapter 18, verse 26, how the Muni's his sense organs, his breath, his mind, and his intelligence, everything was restrained from all material activities. And he was in such a trance. So he's very, very concentrated. And then Maharaj Parikshit asked for some water. He was so thirsty that he asked for the water. And then obviously, because the sage was completely entranced, he couldn't necessarily hear him. And so Maharaj Parikshit was like, what? Like, I am here. I am, you know, a guest in this person's house. Now, in Vedic etiquette, there is such a etiquette on how to receive somebody in your home, you know, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're gonna read a little bit about this verse. So Maharaj Parikshit starts to get a bit angry. So he's like, what? He's frustrated, like, I'm in his home, he's not welcomed me, he's not even said any nice words, he can't even offer me any water, he won't even open his eyes, hasn't even acknowledged that I'm here. Like, what, you know? So there's this key verse here, verse 27 of the 18th chapter. And then Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, because the question can arise, okay, hang on, Maharaj Parikshit had all these good qualities, you know, he was very patient of Bali Maharaj, very tolerant of the earth, He's very powerful, he's very kind, he's compassionate. So how did he overcome, how did he get angry? How did he get frustrated? He's a person that is self-control. And then Srila Prabhupada says in the purport here that such a great devotee and king asked for water from a sage absorbed in trance was certainly providential. So otherwise there was no chance of such a unique happening. So Maharaj Parikshit was thus placed in an awkward position so that gradually Srimad Bhagavatam could be revealed ultimately, which we will discover soon. So this was actually all orchestrated by the will of the Lord. He actually wanted this to happen. There's no other reason behind it. So yeah, he became angry. He wasn't welcomed. He wasn't offered a seat, a place, no water, not even any sweet words. And he felt really neglected and then became angry. Now, yes, Vedic etiquette. So when we're receiving guests, it says here, the law of reception of the codes of Vedic principles states that even if an enemy is received at home, he must be received with all respects. He should not be given a chance to understand that he has come into the house of an enemy. So it's almost like, you go, and then even if there's enmity between that person receiving and the guest, is almost forgotten in the way that they're received, And there's also points in Vedic etiquette and Srimad Bhagavatam that when you don't receive somebody nicely, there are actually so many sins that are occurred. So yeah, we should be very careful and learn from this and how we receive somebody in the home. Even if it's somebody, for example, who's come to fix the boiler or the postman or something, but we should always receive them very nicely and make them feel very welcome. And we can take the example from when we look at Jarasandha, right? He was so opposed to Krishna, and very, very demoniac. And they were about to fight. He was actually about to have a fight with Bhim, and Arjuna and Krishna and Bhim went to his kingdom and his palace, and they were received so nicely with like such a royal reception, like with elephants and arghya. Arghya is when you're given water, and it talks in the Bhagavatam actually how when they were received, it was like there was just friends, like there was no enmity there. But at the same time, when it came to the time of business, getting down to the fight, then there was full energy in fighting. So it's actually, you can see here, like there's a time and place for everything, and it's so structural and so it gives good guidance to a person, how to act in a certain situation, how to behave. It's like if you just follow, there's no way you can go wrong. That's if we follow. Okay, so again, when we go into verse 29, it says, "O Brahmanas, the circumstances have distressed him with extreme hunger and thirst. The king directed toward the sage's anger and envy, which he had never before directed towards a Brahmana." And then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, for a king like Maharaj Parikshit to become angry and envious, especially at a sage and a Brahmana, was undoubtedly unprecedented. The king knew very well that the Brahmanas, sages, children, women, and all men are always beyond the jurisdiction of punishment. You have to be more merciful towards them. Similarly, the king, even though he commits a great mistake, is never to be considered a wrongdoer. Oopsie. But in this case, Maharaj Parikshit became very angry and envious at the sage due to his thirst and anger by the will of the Lord. The king was right to punish his subject for coldly receiving him or neglecting him. But because the culprit was a sage and a Brahmana, it was unprecedented. As the Lord is never envious of anyone, so also the Lord's devotee is never envious of anyone. Another very important lesson for us to learn. The only justification for Maharaj Parikshit's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. So again and again, it's being said for us not to misunderstand Maharaj Parikshit here, that it's emphasized that this is all happening because Krishna wanted it to. And ultimately, so Srimad Bhagavatam could be spoken. So in his anger, he picked up a dead snake and he placed it on the shoulder of Sage Shamika. Now, after he did that, he just sort of walked off and then returned back to his kingdom. But nearby was the sage's son, Shringi, and he came to know, about this, and then he was like, "What? He did this to my dad, you know?" So he started getting angry, and he was hurt that somebody could do this to his father, who was so elevated. And actually, Shingi was a little bit immature. He was a young boy, and he got angry, and then he decided to curse Maharaj Parikshit, and we're going to explore this curse in just a moment from the actual Bhagavatam. So it says, the son of Rishi, his eyes red hot with anger, touched the water of the river Kaushika while speaking to his friends, and discharged the following thunderbolt of words. He says, on the seventh day from today, a snake bird will bite the most wretched one of that dynasty, Maharaj Parikshit, because of his having broken the laws of etiquette by insulting my father. He's insulted him. And actually, even before he says this curse, he's like so angry. He's like, well, he's supposed to be, a protector, and he's behaving like a crow, he's hurting those who desire only good for him. So he compares him to a crow, and almost being a bit hypocritical just before he curses him. So now he goes back into the hermitage, his son, Shringi, and he sees that he sees this snake on his father's shoulder, and he kind of like yells and cries out. And then his father then suddenly, his trance breaks, and then comes to his senses, and he sees that there's this snake on his shoulder. So he just he wasn't disturbed or anything. He was just disturbed more from the yelling of his son. He takes it off his shoulder and puts it down. And then he's like, what's going on? Okay, yeah. So at this point, he's like, what, why are you yelling? And what happened? And he knows then, that the son then tells him, okay, this is what happened, and I've cursed him. And then Shamika Rishijan just says to him, like, what have you done? What have you done? Maharaj Parikshit is the king. He is as good as the God for us. He is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he is always following religious principles, doing everything righteously. And you cursed him, like, this is, unacceptable. And what you did was very, very wrong. And he chastises his son. So now, it's really interesting and very notable how Maharaj Parikshit reacts and responds to the situation. So on his way back to his kingdom, and when he gets back to his kingdom, Maharaj Parikshit realizes, okay, yeah, like he's contemplating, and he's like, at first he's thinking, was the sage really in trance? Or was he just pretending, and he wanted to insult me? And then he was like, like, he wasn't angry anymore. So he was like, okay, actually, I've made a huge offense. He's a brahmana, he's a sage, he was in meditation. And then he accepts his actions, like, okay, like, yeah, I've done something really wrong. So this whole the way he's thinking and the way that he addresses the situation is such a big example for us in any situation when we have done something wrong, when we've made an offense. So in everyday life, we do so many offenses. So this is a great example for how we should reflect on our actions. And then he's like, actually, yeah, I've done something wrong, and I should be punished for this, or, whatever reaction I'm getting, whatever calamity is about to come, like, yeah, that should happen right now. I want to be freed from this sinful reaction, and also I never want to commit this offense again. And then in that, he detaches himself from his wealth, and he hears somebody comes to tell him, yeah, basically you're gonna die in 7 days. Some snake bird, the takshaka, is gonna come and basically kill you, and yeah, you've got 7 days to live. So he's like, yeah, detaches himself from his wealth, and he actually accepts this curse as good news, as it's written in Bhagavatam. Like, oh, okay, this is a chance for me to become completely detached from any of my material responsibilities, my material wealth. You know, let it all burn. He says, let it all burn, let it all go. And I want to, you know, just surrender completely to the Lord. And he becomes indifferent. Nothing sort of affects him, you know, like happiness, sadness, wealth or poverty or hot or cold. He like just wants to become indifferent from everything and so absorbed in the Lord. And then he chooses, this is another very interesting thing, he chooses transcendental loving service. So he could have done so many different things at that time, from trying to counteract the curse. Because he was so powerful, he could have tried to get help of the sages and do another fire sacrifice and maybe counteract the takshaka or counteract the curse or do something. But he didn't. You know, he didn't do any of these things. He said there's no point wasting time in doing that, wasting energy. And he could have also done different ways of self-realization. For example, you know, different types of tapa, austerity, yoga, whatever, these kind of things. But he chose the highest method of self-realization, which was loving devotional service, transcendental loving devotional service, through the highest way of the most important sense, which is to shravanam, to hear. He did that through hearing. And he also decided, yeah, I'm gonna not have any water, not have any food, I'm not even gonna sleep, you know, until I leave my body. And then this is how he dedicates his life, his 7 days, to Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the Bhagavatam is spoken. The Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken because of this curse, because Maharaj Parikshit decides to respond to it so nicely. So there are so many lessons to learn from this whole pastime of Maharaj Parikshit and how the Bhagavatam came to be spoken, and so many reflections we can have. I've just written a couple, but I would love to hear from you, you know, any reflections, any lessons. So for me, what really stood out is keeping good association. It's so important, so important. And not just association from the people, but association in our senses, you know, what we are seeing, what we are speaking, and also hearing, what we are tasting. These things affect everything. They affect our actions ultimately and our consciousness. Like, you know, Ashwatthama was so misfortunate because he had everything. He had such a good setup. His dad was, his father was a elevated devotee, so knowledgeable and quite devoted to the Supreme Lord, you know. And then he had the association of the Pandavas, was brilliant association, but he didn't take that. He decided to associate, even in the midst of good association, he was taking the remnants of bad association, and this is so damaging to him, and it led to his destruction. He was actually cursed that he would remain on the earth and he would never be happy. The jewel was taken from his head, so he's constantly bleeding, and even up to this day there is no record of him having left his body. So apparently he's still on this earth, in this material world, and that he would keep walking and walking and walking until his feet bled, and he would never stay, he would never find peace or satisfaction in one place. He would keep moving. He'd have to keep moving and moving. Also, the four regulative principles are so important if we want to progress in Krishna consciousness. Then it's also written in this verse here in chapter 16, verse 41. Another example for us is to be careful of our anger. Yes, and when it comes to certain situations, now Maharaj Parikshit getting angry was just orchestrated by the Lord. It was an arrangement by the Lord. However, we're not so elevated. So for us, it's easier to become angry. It's easier for us to become under the mode of passion and ignorance. So we should be extra careful to check our anger, have techniques in place on how to remain calm and keep a cool mind and a warm heart in provocative situations. So yeah, I would love to hear your reflections and any other lessons that you may have learned, or anything that you found interesting about this this pastime and the wonderful personality of Maharaj Parikshit.
Hare Krishna, Sita Mataji. That was excellent, and we had comment from Sumazuru Radhika Mataji saying, excellent, Mataji, very wonderful and blissful. You took us all the way to Kurukshetra. Thanks for sharing beautiful images. Wonderful. Any devotees have any questions or any comments, any realizations, anything that they want to share?
Hare Krishna, can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll try my best to answer.
Thank you so much for a really blissful class. I just got confused. I just have two questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
Thank you. You kept saying that Krishna protects his devotees. He protected Arjun. He protected Parikshit Maharaj. Why he failed to protect Abhimanyu and was killed so mercilessly? That was the first.
Yeah, very good question. There is actually a reason behind that. There's always a reason behind everything. It doesn't come to mind right now. I can't actually remember why. But before the battle takes place, there are actually omens at the time as well, like different signs going on, and people know there's something not right. And the situation is so intense because the Kauravas are so, Duryodhana is so led by envy, and there's nothing stopping him. And once the fire of envy is burning, that's it, it's, even if you look at the pastime of, for example, in Canto 4, there's Daksh Prajapati and Shiva and Sati. And Daksha was very envious of Lord Shiva. And even in that pastime, we see that envy is just a fire, and it burns and it destroys everything. And it's so important as devotees to just annihilate that fire straight away, put it out, cool it out. And if you don't, it burns and burns and it destroys everything. So Duryodhana was so led by his envy of the Pandavas, he just couldn't handle it. Even when they were sent to exile, they were nowhere near him. He'd taken all the things that they had built, like their kingdom and everything, and he was still not happy. He just wanted them to be dead, basically, and because he felt threatened by them, just by them being existing. So before the Battle of Kurukshetra, things became so hard that the battle was just inevitable. It was going to happen, and again, the whole situation was orchestrated by the Lord. That the battle was meant to happen, and Krishna and Draupadi have a conversation before that, and Krishna says, Draupadi asks him, like, you're my friend, like, I really want to know what is going to happen, like, and you're my friend, you're our protector, we are totally surrendered unto you. Everything that's going to happen will be good, under your protection. And then Krishna actually tells her that actually, I'm going to tell you briefly, but basically everyone is going to be annihilated in this war. And the only people surviving will be yourself and your husbands. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer. But so one answer is that, yeah, it was meant to happen. That's how it was supposed to happen. There are probably more reasons, like who Abhimanyu was in his past life or something like that. I don't know if anybody else has that knowledge and can maybe Gauranath Rajbabu.
Yeah, so that was good answer. And also he was the son of Moon, Buddha. And so Moon wanted him to return quickly. He didn't want to have that separation from his son longer. He desired his son to be back as soon as possible. And also you nicely said that Lord has a plan. And sometimes we understand, sometimes we don't understand the reason. But even in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, although he protected him from the weapon of Brahmastra, but he did not protect him from the snake bite, did he? No. So he had his plan. He has his plan, and sometimes we understand, sometimes we don't understand. But it's a good question. So those were the reasons, and everything has a reason behind it. And if I understand correctly, that yes, so moon god wants his son back as quickly as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, my
Thank
next
you, Babu. I
question.
didn't know that. So yeah.
Sorry, my next question is,
Yeah.
when you said in the very beginning, you said that when one listens to Bhagavatam, Krishna enters within your heart. But Krishna is already there in a Paramatma form. So did you mean to say that the Paramatma form is dormant and he awakens when we listen to Bhagavatam? Can you kindly shed some light? I'm confused.
Yeah, sure. So that verse, Shintam Swakata Krishna, Punya Shavana Kirtana, Rityanta Stoya Bhadrani Vidnoti Suritsitam. No, I'm just mixing two verses. Shimitam.
I think the last verse you quoted, if you remember, in your
yes, I do.
In your invocation,
yes,
you said at the end, that was the last verse.
Yes, it's come to me now. So I'm just jogging my memory back to the actual verse. So it is persons who regularly hear the Srimad Bhagavatam take the matter who take the matter very seriously shall have the Supreme Personality of God, Lord Shri Krishna, manifested within their heart within a short amount of time. So I guess the keyword is manifestation. He is already there, of course, in his Paramatma form. He's in the heart of every living entity. So, but not every living entity is practicing a devotional life. Not every living entity is remembering Krishna at every point in the day, at every breath, So they're not connected to him in that way. I guess like the easiest way I could say is they're not aware that he's there. So by regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, especially from pure devotees, like Shukadev Goswami, we have our Srila Prabhupada, and all our acharyas in our lineage. By hearing from pure devotees and by doing it regularly, doing it sincerely, that connection with the Lord within our heart becomes more and more established and manifests. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Helps.
Any other questions or any comments, any realizations, any more realizations from anyone? Okay, so everyone is quiet. Thank you, Sumedha Radhika Mataji, for asking those questions. And that leaves me to thank Sita Devi Mataji for a wonderful session. It was brilliant. Slides were very, very beautiful indeed. And we can see that you have put a lot of hard work into this presentation. You covered the all aspects. You covered the background to Maharaj Parikshit, and then his birth was nicely described, and how the astrologers predicted at the time of his birth. And then later, you also nicely described how he had received the Kali, and how he punished the Kali as well, and then how he responded to the curse that was given to him by this son of sage. Wonderful, very wonderful points.
Actually, I haven't done anything. I've just been reading.
That's right. We don't do anything at all. But I just wanted to mention one or 2 points.
Sure.
You mentioned about hearing from pure devotees. Yes. Prabhupada mentions in the Srimad Bhagavatam many times that even if one is not a pure devotee, if one is in the parampara, if one is in the one is presenting as per the parampara, then we should listen. So that is there. That is one important point. If someone is following the parampara, someone is representing the parampara, and is not manufacturing anything, that person is not manufacturing, but he's just presenting as it is, then we can listen.
Wonderful.
That's one point Prabhupada mentioned, I thought I would share. And the other one about the Kali, interaction between Kali and Maharaj Parikshit.
Yes.
That how careful Maharaj Parikshit was that in protecting cows and bulls. And he was equal to every living being. Currently, there is one law for human, there is another law for animals. If a human is hurt, if a human being is hurt, the law is different. If the animal is hit, nothing like that. But as an administrator, as a great king, he was equal to every living entity. Cow being punished, bull being punished. Nowadays, we see that cows and bulls are being slaughtered and everything. The administrator, they don't care. But however, if a man gets some kind of murder or whatever, something, then there is a lot of investigation, a lot of effort goes there. But in the reign of Maharaj Parikshit, that how he was very equal to all the living entities. And so that was one point that I thought I would just share my realization, how much he was willing to look after cows. And these cows and bulls are very dear to Krishna, very dear to Krishna. So that's really wonderful. Thank you so much for doing everything so nicely. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Hare Krishna. And
Hare
just
Krishna.
one quick announcement from my side is that this year marks the 125th appearance anniversary year of Srila Prabhupada. So ISKCON UK, to celebrate this occasion, ISKCON UK has organized a online retreat. So there will be a series of retreats this year, and the first of its kind will be kicking off today. So it will be today and tomorrow. There will be 3 sessions each day, today and tomorrow. So please do register. It is they entitled it as Spark of Krishna Consciousness. So the message was sent out, and if you're not registered, please do register, because then only we get the Zoom link. So as a result of that, we are not doing our usual Sunday program so that the devotees can take part in this online retreat and enjoy. So please do take part in it. And if you're not registered, I would say register. And if any of your friends did not, don't know this, kindly pass this message on. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And once again, Her Grace Sita Devi Mataji ki jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo.
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.